Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy first Friday of the month. It's hard to believe that it is May already, although we have been seeing some nice weather in Chicago. So it's certainly feeling like we are well into spring and that summer is upon us, hopefully soon. I am delighted to be here with you today to do our first Fridays. For those who have not been here before, this is a live broadcast where a McEntee law attorney will kind of run through some news. So kind of a recap of what's been happening in immigration news. We will also address some questions that have come in ahead of time. Sometimes we get live questions, so we'll try to answer those. Just a caveat on that, if you are asking a live question, obviously just be mindful that we're in a public forum, so, just be careful about the information that you're typing online for everybody else to see.
Don't see it live.
So we are supposed to be live on Instagram.
Maybe press go
Let me
live
see.
when you get in there.
We're trying to make sure. I think that should be it now on Instagram as well. Sorry, we're trying to
Yep, you're all
okay,
set.
we're live on Instagram. Hi, Instagram. So we're on all these platforms. So Liz from our team just came in to tell me that the Instagram was not working, but now it is. So that's great. So anyway, welcome to you wherever you're joining us from. I am Fiona McEntee. I'm the managing attorney at McEntee Law Group, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. So one thing I'm going to just start with, which wasn't necessarily part of my script, but it's something I read this morning. I read this piece this morning in the ABA journal. It was written by a judge and a mom of four, Kimberly McTory. It was a great piece about how motherhood has leveled up your lawyer skills. And I just thought it was a really great piece. But one thing that really struck me was that in an ABA study, so an American Bar Association study of more than 8,000 lawyers, an overwhelming 60% of working moms thought that being a mom negatively impacted the way that coworkers thought of them. And I was really surprised to hear that statistic. I am a working mom, 2 kids. A lot of our team have kids as well. And to me, it's like, a big asset and a superpower. So I was just surprised that that people are viewing it or thinking others are viewing it as a negative. So anyway, our firm is very family friendly and we really embrace people's lives outside of work, because I think it enables us to do better work when we have a team that feels really supported. So that's a side note, but it's something that's really important to us in the firm. Real kind of cornerstone of our culture. So on to the news here of First Fridays. So I'm sure everybody has seen the protests that have been happening all throughout college campuses for a while, but really, we've seen a lot of stuff happening this week in particular. We've also seen a lot of arrests that have been happening. And I felt that it was important. We felt as a team that it was important to talk about this, to talk about it from the point of view of, if you're a non-citizen and you want to attend a protest or participate in a protest, what are the things that you need to be aware of? So there are some additional considerations that people need to be aware of. And, we're here, regardless of what you're protesting or what your views are, we wanted to just share some information for people to read. So we've done a blog post and we have also I did a video that has been shared on, I think, TikTok and on LinkedIn, and it kind of runs through some things to be aware of. So, it answers things like, do you have to talk to police about your immigration status? The answer is no, but you shouldn't lie or give false documents. Should you carry your documents with you at a protest? I think consensus is that you should carry copies and not necessarily originals, but it just kind of depends on what your status is. What happens if you're an international student and you get arrested? So you do need to be really careful because international students and visa holders just have other things to think about. And if you do get arrested, you will have to disclose this on any future application, and it might pose an issue depending on what you're arrested, what the actual charge is, if there's conviction, things like that. So we just want people to be mindful of that. And obviously, if you're an international student, you're here, you need to be maintaining your student status. So if you were to get suspended or expelled, which has, there's been threats certainly of that, you just need to think about how that might impact your student visa. So, we're here in the US. There is a long tradition of protest and freedom of assembly, free speech, and those protections do apply to not just US citizens, but people here in the US. However, you do need to think about these additional things if you're not a citizen. And if you're given instructions from law enforcement to move or end activities, people should comply with those to avoid an arrest or charge, because it might impact your case. And finally, I just want to end with just a personal note of someone who grew up in Ireland when there was a lot of conflict in Northern Ireland. I've seen that peace can happen, and it took a lot to get the peace process in the North, and we're very proud of it. And a lot of stuff happened before that people maybe were not necessarily so proud of. But we have that hope, and so anyway, just that kind of informs my thinking on this as well. So okay, so you can read our blog and you can take a look at some of those specific questions and answers if this is something that's important to you. Okay, so in other news, I think you may have seen that the administration here in the US is considering potentially a plan for helping undocumented spouses of US citizens get some kind of documentation. If this happened, it would be incredible. It would be a way for people to go through the green card process without having to leave the US. Spouses of US citizens can sponsor, amongst other relatives, their spouses. But if people haven't entered the US lawfully, or if there's some other reason why, they can't get the green card in the US, this new process that might happen could potentially help a lot of people. I think I read a report in the Wall Street Journal that it's estimated that there's, over 1 million undocumented immigrants married to US spouses. And, a lot of these people have been here for a long time. They've been working, they've been paying taxes. And, if this happens, I think the idea was that it might be similar to what we saw with DACA. So some kind of, basically benefit there. So there's no firm plan in place. It's just something that we've been hearing about. And, kind of like a parole in place is what we've heard of, that would then enable people to apply for green cards without having to leave the US. So I think it would be really tremendously beneficial. So watch this space. And yeah, I think that what the reports that I had read is there was over 1 million spouses in this situation, and then approximately 700,000 people would be able to benefit from this program, which would be great. So, okay, so that is another bit of news. So TPS, temporary protected status, has been extended for Ethiopia. So you can read about that on the USCIS website. So that is a program where if you are in the US and something happens in your home country, like a war or some natural disaster or something, horrific happens in your home country, people who are here are able to apply for this protection from deportation known as TPS. So it's a great benefit for people who are here and have, their home country, just something really horrific happens. But obviously you have to be a citizen of the country, and you need to meet certain requirements, like be here for certain, a time period during which, like when the TPS is announced. So there are certain requirements there. There's also been some student relief employment benefits for certain F1 Palestinian international students. So this was something that was issued in the Federal Register on April 12th. So for certain Palestinian F1 students who are experiencing severe economic hardship as a result of the humanitarian crisis. So this is a way for them to apply for work permits based on the kind of the circumstances that have happened. And so so that's listed there, and it's in the Federal Register. So what else do we have as far as news goes? This is Small Business Week this in the US here, and there are just a lot of statistics that show the support of or just the amount of immigrants that start small businesses in the US. The immigrants are a lot more likely to start businesses than native born Americans. So I think when we're talking about businesses and the economic impact, it's important that we recognize, that a good chunk of them were started by immigrants, and to recognize that. One other thing I wanted to mention was the H-1B visa lottery happened, and I'm not sure, for those who are not necessarily familiar with it, but there was a change in how the lottery was going to be done. The government changed the system to try to even the playing field. So in previous years, somebody could have 10 employers apply for a H-1B registration for them, and it would mean that they would have like 10 different chances of getting selected in the lottery. Well, this time they changed it so there would be this unique beneficiary system. So no matter how many potential employers applied for you, you would only have one chance of getting selected, and then you could pick what employer you wanted to use to file your case. So as a result of that, so there were some better odds of getting selected. So the number of unique beneficiaries this year was approximately 442,000. So that was kind of comparable to the same amount last year. However, the number of eligible registrations went down dramatically. So it went from nearly 800,000, so 750,000 to around 470,000. So the USCIS basically has said that there were far fewer attempts to gain an unfair advantage in prior years, owing to large measures to implement the beneficiary-centric lottery process. So that's the good news. I mean, the bad news is that we still only have 65,000 new H-1Bs plus 20,000 US masters, so 85,000. And if you look at how many unique beneficiaries applied, over 400,000. So, I mean, there's still a massive, discrepancy between the demand and the supply of H-1B visas. So, it's still a lottery, maybe 1 in 4 or whatever, the odds are still really tough for people applying. But I mean, it's getting better, and it's definitely gotten better since that. But still, still a lottery. And the most ideal situation would be to increase the number of H-1B visas available to kind of really account for the market needs. So that is like a lot of the news that we have on our end. There are a couple of upcoming webinars. Attorney Dan from our team is doing an e-visa webinar on the 15th of May that I think you should find helpful. So there's e-visas are for people who are going to either set up a business in the US, a new business, or purchase an existing business. It's the investor visa. Dan, I believe, may also discuss, I'm not sure if he's going to discuss the E1 visa, which is a treaty trader. So if you have a business that has majority of international trade between your home country and the US, then that's the E1. You have to be from a treaty country for either of these options, and there's a list of treaty countries. So it's not going to work for everybody, but if you're from a treaty country and you are interested in bringing your business to the US or starting a business in the US, this has also worked for international students who finish up their studies and want to stay on and set up a business. We've worked with people in that situation as well. I would sign up to the webinar with Dan on 5:15. The next First Friday that we're going to be doing is on June 7th. So in about a month's time, we are going to be doing First Fridays. I think Dan might also be doing that. So Dan's on the schedule for the next few webinars. Okay, so I have some questions that we've received in ahead of time. So I will go through some of these and I will answer them. Okay, so the first relates back to the protests. We were seeing a lot of questions come in relation to the protests. So somebody had asked, what are the consequences of participating in a pro-Palestinian encampment in the university? Someone had asked, hypothetically, if they were to get arrested, would we be able to help? So this, our firm, we're not criminal defense attorneys. So in that sense, we're not going to be your port of call for something like that. That's where you would really need a criminal defense attorney to assist you. If this person is an international student, I would just urge caution, because getting arrested can potentially impact your student visa, both now and in the future. And we're not here to squash anyone's right to protest or to vocalize their views. We are totally in support of that. But we do want you to be mindful of, if there's law enforcement present and if you are directed to, take down tents, encampments, things like that, and you risk getting arrested if not, and that's where you're at more risk than your classmates who are US citizens. So it's just something that you need to think about as well. So we're not, unfortunately, going to be the attorneys to be on call if you did get arrested. What we're trying to do is put out proactive information ahead of time that can enable people to just be mindful of some of these things while they are thinking about exercising their rights to protest and free speech. So hopefully the blog is helpful and gives you an idea of kind of what you should be mindful of, when participating or attending a protest. Okay, another question was, somebody emailed us saying sent in a question saying they're on an L2 visa. So this is this dependent spouse visa of someone on an L1. They said, but their husband is, in this question says their ex-husband is leaving the US and she needs to transfer the visa. How difficult would it be to switch to an O1 visa if they had a large TikTok following? Okay, this is a really interesting question. So the first thing that jumps out at me there is ex-husband, right? And the reason that's important is you being in an L2 status is dependent on you being married to somebody who's in L1 status. So if you were to get a divorce, well, that would terminate that relationship and therefore, terminate your status potentially. So you would first, regardless of moving to an O, you would definitely want to explore whether your divorce is going to impact your status. And I think it likely will. And I've actually advised people in similar situations before. So that's the first thing that you really, really need to explore as soon as possible. The second thing, assuming that's a non-issue and the divorce is coming in the future, and also the husband's leaving the US as well. And if you're on L2, you're dependent on them being an L1. And if they leave the US and are no longer an L1, your L2 could be at risk. So I just have a lot of questions about the L2 apart from other options. So that's the second thing. How difficult? So imagine the husband was still here and there was no issues with the divorce and you were just wondering about moving from an L2 to an O. So that is potentially possible to move from one status to another by filing a change of status in the US or by applying for an O and saying you'll go for a visa processing abroad. How difficult would it be to get an O depends really on your following. You mentioned you have a large TikTok following. So I would say it's not, that's a good sign towards an O, but we would need to look at the O requirements and see which ones you're meeting. Anna, another attorney in our firm, and I did a webinar all about O1Bs for content creators and influencers. So I would recommend that you try to get that. I believe there's a recording of that on YouTube that you can look at, and that would be helpful because we break down all the criteria for the O, who's going to be the petitioner, what boxes are you going to check, and kind of as it relates specifically to content creators and people on social media. So you'd need really an assessment of your qualifications for the O to see if that would work for you. Okay, next question is, if you're on a student visa and you start in August, would you be able to travel to the US to see your sister on a visitor's visa if you come back to your country after the visit and then re-enter on the student visa? So this, I'm trying to figure out if you already have a student visa and if you're trying to get another visitor's visa. So I can't really give you this specific advice, but because I just don't know. Normally, if you're on a student visa and you're completing your studies, you can be here for the summer potentially. So I don't know. I would need to talk to you individually about that. I also don't know if you already have a visitor's visa. Would you be trying to come in on ESTA? Are you trying to apply for a visitor's visa? Sometimes in these situations, you think about it like, does it make sense to try to come in July for a couple of weeks as a visitor if you're coming back in August as a student anyway? For me, that might be a risk that I might not take personally. But again, in order to give you advice, we would really need to know more about your student visa, any potential visitors visas, ESTA, where you're from, things like that. Okay, good question. Do I have any tips for OPT application process? Yes, I have tons of tips on OPT. So OPT is the optional practical training permit. So it's a work permit that international students can apply for. Normally they apply in the run up to or just very soon after graduation. I did a video actually on this where I broke out all the OPT application tips from, I'm just trying to see if I can pull it up, from the USCIS. So USCIS had given great tips for applying for OPT, including things like making sure you're aware of the dates that you need to be mindful of in terms of like when you need to apply. Also, they advise to file online where possible versus like mailing in, and making sure that you have all the required paperwork, making sure that everything is signed as needed, making sure that the fee that you pay is correct. So there's a lot of like kind of like real like minutia involved in anything immigration, and I would make sure that you really get all your I's. I always kind of mix up, is it I's dotted and T's crossed? Make sure you've done all that, because immigration, it can be very unforgiving, and so you don't want to make any mistakes when it comes to OPT. The good news is that the International Students Office should be there to help you pretty much every step of the way with this. They have a lot of resources for people. So that would be a great protocol as well. And I can also try and link my previous video that I did, that I ran through all the tips on OPT. And that's on my TikTok as well, if you want to see that. Otherwise, we can link it somewhere in the notes after here. Okay, so someone's asking, can I do CPT if I'm on a J1 visa? As far as I know, CPT, which is curricular practical training, is only for F1s. So if you're on a so J1s, there's so many different types of J1s also. There's maybe 10 different types of J1s, between J1 trainee, J1 exchange student, there's au pairs, interns, so there's lots of different types of J1s. So if you're a J1 student, I would talk to your school about how you might be able to get work authorization, if that's even possible. It just really depends on what kind of J1 you're on. Okay, final question is, what are the options for my boyfriend who lives with me to come with me to the US if you get an O1B visa? Okay, so if you're getting an O1B visa, you mentioned a boyfriend. So if you're not married, there's no spousal visa there for this. But in any scenario, the spousal visa for the O does not permit employment. So if your partner wants to work, then that's not going to be a great fit for them. One thing to note though about the O1B is that people can bring essential support personnel with them on the O, as like an O2 essential support personnel. And that allows the person to work with the primary O1, but you need to show that you meet the requirements for it. So in this sense, you would think of, let's say you're a creator, and it's your full-time job, and you're obviously, meeting O1 standards because you're getting the O1B. Sometimes in this scenario, people's partners go all in on the creator's business too, and they become almost like their PA, their right-hand man or woman, and they help them run things behind the scenes. They, will respond to their DMs. They will help set up brand deals. Like, they'll do all these things like their manager, really. And in that scenario, there's potentially this essential support personnel O visa that your boyfriend could get, assuming he's worked with you in that kind of capacity. And his work authorization will be limited to him, coming here to work with you in that capacity. Apart from that, if he wants to do other things, we'd really need to see what are his qualifications, what's he doing, is he working for a company that might be able to transfer him to the US? Could he get a J1? Could he get his own O1? And what if you're from an E2 treaty company, would he want to set up his own business? Do you want to, so there's lots of different potential options. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's lots of like actual options that will work for him, but there are some things that we can explore to see if that might be a good fit for him. But that's a great question, and it's something that comes up in practice. And I will note that that essential support personnel is not for every type of O. It's really for the O1Bs, the artists, people working in that industry, or O1A athletics. So not every O is able to bring essential support personnel in that same way. So that kind of wraps up our first Friday. We have 3 minutes left to go to spare, so we're doing great on time. I hope everybody is looking forward to a nice weekend. We are getting ready to have our immigration lawyer conference in Chicago in June. AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, has a big, massive conference where thousands of immigration attorneys come to attend, from the US, but also internationally, because there's a global section as well. There's a global conference. And this year it's in Chicago. So we're just really excited to welcome people to Chicago. I just signed up for a 5K that I'll be running on one of the mornings of the conference. I'm also speaking on 2 panels, one at the global conference on immigration lawyers and media, and our role in the media and what that role should be. And then I'm also speaking at a panel at the AILA, the main AILA conference, about international students. This name, NIL, name, image, likeness, and work authorization, unauthorized employment as a visitor, things like that I'm really excited about as well. So yeah, lots of things coming up. I see comments here. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe. I feel like one of those YouTubers that my kids listen to. Don't forget to like, subscribe for next month's First Fridays, but please do, so that you'll get notified. We also have a great newsletter that we send out periodically. So you can go on our website and sign up for that. And then, between like First Fridays, we're putting out a lot of content on pretty much every platform that you can imagine. So if you like to get like little like sound bites, periodic like news, follow us and you'll get all that. But otherwise, it has been great being with you today. I wish everybody a great rest of May and have a lovely weekend, and I will be back to see you soon. Take care. Bye.